All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a huge question today. How in the world do we make sense of a world that feels so chaotic? We're going to break down the massive forces that are shaping our future. And we'll be using the ideas of macro investor Ray Dalio and some other brilliant thinkers to navigate what he calls Stage 5. So let's start with this really powerful idea from Ray Dalio. He basically says that all the chaos we're feeling, it's not just a series of random unlucky events. Not at all. He sees it as the output of a giant, interconnected machine, one that's driven by cycles that have happened over and over again throughout history. The key is, if you can understand the machine, you can start to understand what's happening and why. And this moment we're in right now, Dalio has a name for it: Stage 5. Now, this isn't some doomsday prophecy, but it is a really critical, high-risk period. Why? Because something is happening that almost never happens. You've got 3 huge, long-term cycles all peaking at the exact same time: the money and debt cycle, the internal conflict cycle inside countries, and the external conflict cycle between world powers. And that convergence, that's what's creating this incredibly volatile environment we're all living through. So, look, the whole point of this isn't to perfectly predict the future. Nobody can do that. It's about understanding the mechanics, the gears of the machine that are driving events. Because once you see those cause and effect relationships, you can stop getting yanked around by every single headline and start making smarter, calmer decisions for your own life. Okay, so let's dive into the first and honestly, the biggest part of this whole machine: money, credit, and debt. You can think of this as the engine that powers the entire global economy. And right now, as a key feature of Stage 5, that engine is under some serious strain. So here's the million-dollar question. When does all this debt, from being a tool we can manage to something really unstable? People are always looking for that one magic number, like a specific debt to GDP ratio. But the experts will tell you that's not the right way to look at it. It's not about one single metric. It's about a whole set of signals that show the fundamental character of the system is changing. In this slide is so interesting because these are the exact red flags that the experts are always talking about. Historian Carmen Reinhardt, she watches for the moment a country just becomes politically unable to deal with its debt. Former Fed Chair Paul Volcker, he looked for a loss of discipline when leaders just assume the money will always be there. And as Mohamed El-Arian often points out, when everyone's confidence is based on the idea that they'll just get bailed out again, well, you're in a really dangerous place. These are all signs that the debt cycle is getting wobbly. And all this debt stuff leads to this really weird dilemma for the world's main currency, the US dollar. On the one hand, it's basically the plumbing of the whole global financial system. It's incredibly easy and convenient to use. But on the other hand, when it's used as a weapon through sanctions, and you combine that with really high debt levels, well, it makes other countries pretty nervous. They start to see their dependence on the dollar as a huge strategic risk. And this is exactly why, in an environment like this, you see central banks and smart investors turning to things like gold. As strategist James Rickards puts it, it's not a trade, it's insurance. Think about it. You don't buy fire insurance and then complain a few months later that your house hasn't burned down, right? Same idea. Gold is a physical asset that isn't somebody else's promise to pay. It's a hedge for when trust in all those paper promises starts to wear thin. Okay, let's shift to the next big gear in the machine. All this financial stress, it doesn't just happen in a spreadsheet somewhere. It puts enormous pressure on the social fabric inside a country. And that brings us to the second major cycle in Stage 5, internal conflict. According to the experts who study how democracies unravel, it's never a sudden collapse. It's a slow, 4-stage drift. It starts when the referee breaks, when people stop seeing institutions like courts as neutral. Then politicians stop treating their opponents as legitimate competitors and start treating them like enemies. After that, the shared story of the nation fractures into 2 totally different realities. And finally, you get to a point where compromise is seen as betrayal. Each step just makes the next one worse, and the trust that holds everything together just evaporates. And this is where things get really, really dangerous. When people lose faith in the system, when they feel like it's completely broken, their desire for a solution becomes so intense that they become willing to support a leader who promises to just get things done, even if it means shattering all the rules. They're willing to trade freedom for just a little bit of order, because order feels like a relief from all the chaos. Okay, now let's throw a huge wild card into this entire system: technology. Things like artificial intelligence and digital money, they aren't just cool new gadgets. They have the power to either help us solve these massive problems or to pour gasoline on the fire and make them dramatically worse. You can think of AI's future as having two very different doors. Behind door number one, it's a prosperity engine. As economist Eric Brynjolfsson says, if it's used widely, it could create an explosion of productivity that raises living standards for everybody. But behind door number two, it's a power weapon. If all the benefits get captured by just a tiny group of people, it could widen inequality to a breaking point and become a major source of conflict between nations. So you see, this isn't just a technical problem. It's a deeply political one. The big question isn't just if AI is going to make us wealthier. The real crucial question is who gets that wealth. Making sure those benefits are shared widely isn't just some nice social goal. As economists like Darren Acemoglu have shown, it is absolutely essential for keeping society stable. If you don't solve that distribution problem, the tech could actually make the internal conflict cycle we just talked about even worse. And you see this exact same trade-off between convenience and control with this idea of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. The upside? Sure, it's obvious, faster payments, less fraud, all that good stuff. But the downside, as thinkers like Eswar Prasad and Shoshana Zuboff warn, is potentially the end of financial privacy as we know it. The real risk here is that this kind of programmable money could be used to control what you are and are not allowed to buy. It's like giving someone a remote control for your wallet. So after all that, the debt, the conflict, the tech, it's easy to feel kind of helpless, right? It feels overwhelming. But you're not. This final section is all about a practical, personal playbook that you can use to build resilience in this really volatile world. And the mindset here is absolutely everything. As the writer Morgan Housel might put it, the goal is not to be fearless. That's impossible. And it's not to predict the future perfectly. The goal is to be durable. It's all about building a life, financially and personally, that can take a few hits and surprises without breaking, so you can stay in the game long enough for things to get better. So what does that actually look like? Well, first, you got to reduce what strategist Annie Duke calls your forced moves. That just means have more savings and less debt so you're never forced to sell something or make a bad decision when you're under pressure. Second, diversify your life. Not just your money, build skills that are valuable anywhere. Third, and this is a big one, stop trying to make everything perfectly efficient. As Nassim Taleb argues, total efficiency is fragile. You need to build in some slack, some redundancy. And finally, build your community. Your relationships are a type of wealth that pays off big time when things get tough. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important idea from Dalio. Understanding these cycles isn't about giving up and thinking everything is doomed. It's the exact opposite. It shows us that history isn't set in stone. Because these forces are mechanical, we get a choice in how we respond, as individuals, as parents, and as citizens. So the question becomes, are you going to be a stabilizing force that builds resilience and decency, or an accelerating force that just adds to the conflict? The choice is ours.